we have people who appear thin, but they could have visceral fat stored inside their organs.
Yes.
So, what is your advice for people who have this kind of a phenomena?
So for them, two things. So the first is that even if you're already skinny, you still need to lose fat because you have a very low personal fat threshold, and genetically, um, the Asian population in general, including Indians, genetically just have a lower personal fat threshold capacity, um, often much lower. And again, Roy Taylor's most recent clinical trial showed that in people who are at a normal body weight, if you have them diet and lose body fat, they resolve their diabetes. They don't need to lose as much body fat as somebody with obesity does. They might only need to lose, whereas someone with obesity might need to lose 15% of their body weight. A normal weight person might just need to lose 7 to 8%. And it fixes the problem. But the other issue with especially with Indians, I would say, is that they really need to focus on building up their muscle tissue. They might be skinny and they have fat stored on the inside, but you can only diet so much. What the bigger issue is, they need to increase kind of the size of their metabolic bucket. So if you have more muscle tissue on your body, you have a greater metabolic sink for incoming energy and especially glucose. Muscle tissue takes up 85% of the glucose after you eat. So it will cause less spillover of the energy into fat tissue. So if you have more muscle, your body can store energy in it and it won't need to store it in fat tissue, which means that you can now eat more and even gain more weight without running into your personal fat threshold because you're now partitioning more of that energy to muscle tissue. And really, everyone should be engaging in resistance training and trying to build up as much healthy lean mass as they can. But this is especially the case for people with low levels of lean mass to begin with.
Right, Alex. And there's something about having fats and carbohydrates together, as you mentioned earlier, that fat storage increases if you combine carbohydrates and fats.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting because a lot of food options in India could have that combination as well.
Oh,
And
yeah.
what is the mechanism? Even if it is not refined carbohydrates, it could be healthy carbohydrates, but still it can be eaten with a lot of fat in India. So what is the mechanism behind this and how to avoid getting into this trap?
Well, there's two parts here. So one of them has to relate to the biochemistry. And the biochemistry comes down to the Randall cycle, which is basically states that uh, glucose and fatty acids compete for use of cellular energy production. And so, for example, the body prefers to use glucose over fatty acids for energy. So if you have glucose present, it will preferentially store any fat that you're eating alongside it while it burns the glucose. Uh, Now, if you eat a bunch of dietary fat, however, that interferes with insulin's ability to bind to its receptor. So if you eat a meal that is high in carbs and high in fats, the body wants to use the carbs, but the fatty acids in the bloodstream are interfering with insulin's ability to get those carbs inside the cell. And so now you just have energy build up in your bloodstream and it's having a harder time nourishing the cells that want to use it. In the long run, I used to recommend that for this reason, when people structure their meals, they should make those meals, all meals should have protein, but then the other predominant macronutrient should be either carbs or fats, not both in combination. I've since kind of stepped back from that position because I don't think that over the long term, I haven't seen anything convincing to suggest that it accelerates metabolic dysfunction over the long term. It definitely causes an acute state of insulin resistance in the short term. We have research showing that. For example, if you eat a potato and it takes, 2 units of insulin, and then you add some butter to that potato, it takes 3 times as much insulin to deal with the same amount of carbohydrate. And that's because that fat, again, is causing insulin resistance. Now, theoretically, this would cause problems if it's, say, at every meal, it's combined with chronic overeating. There's several factors that kind of all commingle. But if you're dieting or if you're metabolically healthy, it's probably not going to be a huge issue. The bigger problem is unrelated to the biochemistry. The bigger problem is that when you're eating foods and meals that are high in carbs and fats, even if it's from whole foods, those meals are going to be more palatable. They're going to stimulate your hedonic reward center to a greater extent, and they're going to provoke you into eating more than you would otherwise. Now, maybe you're a hard training athlete, and that's a good thing because you do need to meet those energy demands. And so you need to have foods that make you want to eat them. That makes perfect sense. Um, or maybe you track all of your food, you're very neurotic about it. And so it doesn't matter if you want to eat more or if it makes you hungrier, you're not going to do it and you're going to use willpower to do that, then maybe it's not an issue for you. But for most people existing in their daily lives, and this is a fundamental issue here in America, and I'm sure it is in India as well, uh, these people aren't paying attention to any of that. So if they're just going to passively overeat more and more and more when they have these food combinations, and this is going to lead to fat gain over time and eventually, metabolic problems.
Right. And yeah, just one question. How can someone determine their fat threshold and stay below it?
If they don't have metabolic dysfunction, they're below it. So again, it's kind of a moving target, and it's not something where we currently have the tools to be able to measure you as a person and be like, this is where your personal fat threshold is currently. We just don't have the tools to do that. The only thing that we can do is we can say, okay, look, do you have metabolic problems? Yes. Okay. Lose some body fat and see if you still have them. If you do, lose more body fat because at some point your biomarkers, your fasting glucose, your insulin levels, even your blood lipids, your post meal blood glucose levels, all of those should be normalized in the normal range. And until they are, you're above your personal fat threshold.